Wicked out of circumstances. No, he was simply born bad. That's a quote from Robert E.O. Speedwagon, and he's correct. Dio wasn't really made evil despite his bad childhood, he simply was evil. As to go to the lengths that he did out of having an awful childhood really doesn't add up at the end of the day. And that's something I enjoy about Dio. He doesn't really have a rhyme or reason for why he's this way. He's simply just evil. Hi, I'm Talon Talks. Let's talk about Dio, and why his character is easily one of, if not the greatest villain in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Now, a big part about Dio's character is his charisma, and Dio's charisma has been said to calm down those around him. As Avdol said, his words calmed his soul, and it's all because of this devil's charm he has. It's an impossibly powerful and overlooked feature of this character, and I utterly enjoy it. Charisma is something that not every character has, anime or not. Characters usually just look at the villain out of fear or respect, but Dio, they think of him charismatically because of this devil's charm. But I specifically want to talk about why Dio's army works for him. Usually when characters work for a villain is that some have the same motive, or people work for a villain again out of fear, or for unknown reasons that may or may not be unveiled later. But charisma is definitely something that should be checked with villains, and Dio's charisma is some of the best. His enemies feel joy, although I think that was forgotten. Araki may have forgotten to sleep on his memory foam mattress, as it was said and shown that some felt fear. But anyway, Dio doesn't have an army out of fear. Out of every category, he has one out of respect, and, well, control with the flesh buds. Good leaders don't control out of fear. Those who are controlled out of fear are mere pushovers, like Whole Horse or whatever you are. And that's something I feel should be explored with every single villain. One of my favorite examples from a modern manga is Overhaul. And yes, I've explained how much I hate My Hero Academia. I've got to admit, Overhaul is a very, very well done character. As, Hey, how's it going? Editor Talon Talks here. It's apparent that I did not emphasize why I enjoy Overhaul so much, even though I did an entire video on it. So let me explain why I think he's a better example when it comes to modern manga, at least to the top of my head. Overhaul, as well as Dio, has an army out of respect, and his army is willing to do anything and everything to the benefit of Overhaul and not to themselves. Now, of course, this is a big difference because as Overhaul does actually respect his army and Dio doesn't. Look at characters like Rappa and I forgot every other character who worked for Overhaul. They worked for him out of respect, because Overhaul was able to gain their respect because he was honest or, well, he killed Rappa time and time again. That's the only reason I remember who that character is. But I feel like if you use charisma and respect correctly, you can actually make a well-rounded villain. As long as you put in the time and effort. Again, as long as you put in the time and effort. But out of respect, others are willing to die for the benefit of Dio. Inya, even on the brink of death, with nothing to lose or gain, wouldn't dare give up the location of Dio, while Vanilla Ice chopped his own head off to provide Dio with blood, to simply heal his neck, and he could have taken the blood of anyone around him. And Dio even healed Vanilla Ice, because of the sacrifice he was willing to do for Dio. That is how far this charisma of Dio's goes. It was said that when one meets Dio, they feel joy, while with others they resist, flee, struggle, or accept. I also want to talk about the symbolism of Dio as a vampire, if there is any, but the thing about vampires is that they take innocence, and that's symbolism. Basically, it's the same thing with Dio and his army. He turns them into zombies and they lose their humanity. Therefore, they lost their innocence. Hello, yeah? Yeah? Oh, no, I haven't taken my pills today, but why do you ask? Which adds to his charisma, which is interesting. He uses his charisma to his advantage to take the humanity from his servants, which is why I think he was made a vampire. Araki has written each and every part of JoJo's with such precision, and if it's a notable detail, then it usually has purpose. So why shouldn't the vampire be the same? It could have been a zombie. It could have been a Wendigo, but it was chosen to be a vampire. And I feel that Dio was specifically chosen for that because of this reason. Now, to end off the charisma part, I want to say that with simply just charisma, there is so much you can do. And I think Rocky uses it to its utmost peak and advantage, and it shows his true abilities as a writer, which is something that you don't get with a lot of modern series. Now, yes, you have Musa, but I'm keeping it real. That's Michael Jackson if he were Dio. Dio loses his humanity to gain a greater exterior power, which isn't entirely uncommon, Sasuke in the metaphorical sense or Kakashibo in a literal sense. You can find this concept again and again and again in anime and manga, but in my opinion, I think Dio is one of the best to do it. I feel like Dio is doing this to not feel defenseless anymore. He's trying to take over the world. And why? Well, this is a more thought out version of his original plan, taking the fortune of the Joestars, and in that way he'd gain power, and never be looked down on again. And when that didn't work, he became a vampire to become a being more powerful than ever thought, betraying his life as he would never see the sun again. And what did he gain? Nothing. It didn't work. But he'd come back and he would have a symbolic rematch with Jonathan in the form of Star Platinum. That's probably not true though. And he obtained greater power in the form of Stan. But unlike Cars, he did not overcome his weakness in the form of the rays of the sun. So this life he had given away still came at a cost. And Dio was willing to do anything to become powerful, to never have to deal with this world ever looking down on him. Now you probably already got this part from, well, basic symbolism, but the sun is a representation of life. And as I said earlier, Dio gave his up for greater power, which is why he's an undead vampire. Now, that's just basic symbolism when it comes to zombies or vampires, or really any other creature who is allergic to the sun. It's because they are not actually living. They are just moving corpses, void of life. And I think this adds to Dio's character. Again, he gave up his own life for greater power. And why? Because Dio is a villain with fear. He has fear of being helpless in a situation, as well as the Joestars. What, I'm just trying to be fair here. As said earlier, as in just now, so he vows to no longer allow that to be the case, and he tries to take over the world, but not only did he try to take it over, the world became his, and he was able to stop time, though it wasn't really much, as it was only merely delaying the strand of fate that was bound to him. But because of this mindset, he cares only for what he has to gain in any sort of matter, and considering what his background was, I couldn't blame him. People are a means to an end, much like what we went over slightly in the charisma part of the video. These stand users work for him due to his charisma, and he couldn't care less if they live or die. Of course, there's outliers like Pushi, but I'll get into why that's the case later, as well as give Pushi his own video. He had many stand users work under him, and they were only used to slow down the Part 3 team, so he could reach his goals, but these users weren't strong enough, and so he was defeated by Jotaro in the end. But that's the other part of it. He expects those around him to answer to his every demand. Some may get what they want, but these things to him are worthless and are items that can be discarded without a second thought. People want money, they want fame, food, to be loved, and to make love. But Dio is free from any of those desires. At this point in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, he was written with one simple desire: to take the world and make it his own. And you know, I understand Part 6 Dio exists, but to me, this Dio and this Dio are written with entirely different intentions. And none of this fortune can overcome conquering the world. And while he may be bound to the limitations of the shadows, and no fortune, no possession, no position in the world can overcome conquering the world itself, he appears to not be bound by that feeble mind of thinking. He's no longer attracted to these insignificant things, now that he's been freed of his humanity, which shows how close he's come, yet how far he's strayed. And though he doesn't plan out every single arc until he gets there, this shows Araki's genius when it comes to writing characters. And he did this as well with Dio, giving him a god complex and a superiority complex. He outdoes Jonathan in everything, essentially belittling him in everything he does. And he does this to hide the fact that he is in fact inferior to Jonathan in many ways. Dio lied to Jonathan's friends to make him seem superior. Sure, he did this to get into the position to take the Joestar fortune, but it also seems like he did this out of the fact that he was inferior. I mean, break a kid's spirit, yeah, I get that. I do that all the time. Kill his dog? Now you lost me. But in terms of money, Dio has none. In terms of parents, Dio has none. So he tries to make himself seem like the superior option to Jonathan's friends, Jonathan's father, and even himself, as he does all this to feel superior to JoJo, as well as with his god complex shown in multiple scenes, comparing himself to a god, saying he's invincible, sticking his fingers through his skull to show that he can't die. But it's also shown in comparison with another character that is usually just never mentioned, the US Senator. Because he is much like Dio, the US Senator, not Armstrong, says that he is basically invincible. He can do anything he wants. He can't die, because he is simply a senator. While Dio has been shown to believe the same thing about himself, showing what is basically the same guy. But what would happen in comparison if that ego got out of control? And soon, And soon Dio would end up like that in a fight against Jotaro with his skull beaten in, asking how could this happen to me, Dio. His intelligence was also a big thing about his character, but I really haven't gotten to it yet. But what I haven't gotten to yet is the fact that his intelligence was simply his downfall. Dio has a hubris too big. It's so big, again, that he underestimated Jotaro, which then led to his loss. And to preface this, he stuck a finger through his skull, again, while saying his stand was power to the maximum, as well as taunting Jotaro, asking him if that's all his anger is worth. Again, this is some amazing writing, and I'm not completely sure if that was the senator's intended purpose, because I read every interview I could get my hands on, and I have never seen it. But if not, then that shows how good Araki is at his job, doing this even subconsciously. There is simply no other like Araki. Like, how are you gonna write one of the most well-regarded series but forget the vast majority of random fun facts? How does that even happen? Despite his moral flaws, he does have some redeemable qualities. Specifically, he can be human towards others, as he was able to not only have trust in Pucci, act like a friend towards them. And I know what you're gonna say, I don't know, nor do I care why a 100-year-old grown man and a 16-year-old child are in the same bed.
I'm Chris Hansen.
Now, of course, if you watch part 6, this was all done to Dio's benefit, but still. Dio asks Pucci if he would betray him one day, and to just extract the world from Dio. Pucci knows that Dio can't survive in sunlight. He even tempts Pucci by telling him to take the stand, while putting Pucci's hand on the disc. This feels almost like a test of character for Pucci, and it was. It was to test him in order to see if he has any of these worldly desires. But much like a lot of other characters, Pucci views Dio as a god. Quote, I love you in the same manner as men love their god. And Dio even apologizes to Pucci when he realizes that Pucci holds no ill intent towards him. And Dio even feared losing Pucci, as he would be able to help him attain heaven. And this is classic character analysis, so let me get into this very, very quickly. Dio's first need is his stand, and his second need is a trustworthy friend, one that must be free from desire, and one that follows God's law. His weakness is to let go of his stand due to a lack of courage, and his desire was to attain heaven, by Pucci. Dio was reborn as the Green Baby, under what seems to be the Tree of Knowledge. Pucci and the Green Baby, Dio became one, so I guess you could say Dio was also able to attain heaven. Yeah, and so Dio achieved his happiness. Depending on who you are, this could either be a desire or the self-revelation, but the best possibility is the new equilibrium. As I would like to get into the 36 part, but there are so many things that the number 36 could be, like 2 lives ascending the masters, which would be a great one. Dio's intelligence, along with allowing him to pass these weak-minded desires of humanity, allows for him to play mind games with his opponents. This can make the opponent fear Dio, want to serve him, or doubt their own abilities, much like with Polnareff. He says that Polnareff is a talented stand user, and it will be shameful to kill him, giving him an option of being a slave once more, or telling him to come up the stairs and die, which is essentially just playing good cop as well as bad cop at the same time, which I actually enjoy about this. And Polnareff was constantly brought back down to the bottom stair again and again. This strategy, along with his words, made Polnareff believe that he was subconsciously afraid, but even though his intellect was high, it clearly wasn't enough to pass his cocky and egotistical nature, which was his downfall, as he underestimated Jotaro, and he didn't think his entire final plan through, which, if you remember, was the opposite of his downfall against Jonathan, as Dio was said to lose to him because he was testing his abilities. And here he knew his limits, but went much more all out, and towards the end, he lost because he thought Jotaro died. But as I've completely forgotten about part 6's attaining heaven thing, I will explore that more here, as it doesn't really change the intentions of part 3 Dio. Now, yes, they're the same character, and the intentions were then retconned in part 6, or just completely changed. Those mean the same thing. You know what I'm trying to say. However, I don't want to take out a huge part of my script, so, yeah, Dio says in part 6 that he wishes to attain heaven due to it being where true happiness lies. And this rebrands everything and changes his character almost entirely. Dio seeks happiness over all else. I mean, you are originally a psychopathic, loony scoundrel, but you did this for happiness? Explain. No, I'm serious. Explain. Dio has help in the form of Poochie, but Poochie is much different than the others, due to what I said earlier. He may have come to that conclusion after rizzing up an army. I just wanted to say rizz up an army. Leave me be. But yeah, this shows that he did have the intelligence to fight Jotaro, and even had the intelligence to defeat him without his cockiness. But again, Part 3 Dio and Part 6 Dio were most likely written with entirely different intentions, so I'll leave it here. But that there is how you write a great villain. I thank you for getting this far into the video. This video was, very long. I'm not just working on this one, I'm also working on a Cars video, a Kira Yoshikage video. I've also got to rewatch Part 5, because, you know. And then I'm also doing a Poochie video, but that's where that right there would be where the villain analysis for JoJo stops, as Part 7 has never been printed in English, and I get there are some fan translations, but I would prefer to get the actual translations over some fan translations, because last time I got fan translations, it was the Soul Eater translations, and I even compared it to a lot of the parts in Soul Eater, and the differences were just staggering. They were just awful. Oh, speaking of Soul Eater, yeah, I'm not doing those anymore. Simply because these villain analysis do way better. They take less time to make. Yeah, I already said every reason why I'm continuing just the villain analysis videos. But yeah, everyone, have a great day, and I'll see you next week with Cars.